The champagne flutes sparkled under the soft chandeliers, clinking together like wind chimes in a storm of laughter, luxury, and lies. It was a night that screamed perfection, except for the part where I stood at the back, watching my sister command the spotlight like she was born in it. She wasn't. I was the one who built the stage she danced on. Quite literally. That restaurant? The one she rented out for her $150,000 birthday bash? I laid the tiles. I scrubbed the ovens. I poured every dime, dream, and drop of sweat into those walls. And now I was the uninvited guest, the invisible brother, the homeless man she publicly humiliated. I never imagined it would come to this. That blood could curdle so cold. That my own sister, Ava, the one I shared my secrets and cereal with as a kid, would look at me with such disgust. But there she stood, draped in a custom Valentino gown, finger extended like a royal decree. Homeless, she said, eyes sweeping over me with the indifference of a stranger. Get out. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to me, some with pity, some with confusion, a few with amusement. But no one stood up. No one questioned her. That was the moment everything changed. You see, I wasn't always down and out. I was once the golden child, the chef, the creator, the dreamer. And Ava? She was just my little sister, watching me cook in our cramped kitchen, wide-eyed and hungry for more than just food. But somewhere along the line, things shifted. She rose while I fell. She inherited fortune while I lost everything. And the worst part? I let it happen. I stood frozen in that restaurant I once called mine, heart pounding, jaw clenched. I had a choice. Walk away quietly like a defeated man, or stay, speak, and burn every lie to the ground. This is the story of how it all began to unravel, and how I finally took my name back. It wasn't always like this between Ava and me. There was a time we were inseparable, siblings against the world. After our mother passed when we were just teenagers, I practically raised her. Dad was there in body, but never in spirit. He buried himself in spreadsheets and stocks, leaving us to fend for ourselves in that cold mansion filled with silence. I learned to cook not because I loved it back then, but because someone had to. I still remember Ava sneaking into the kitchen late at night, wrapped in a blanket, eyes sleepy but hungry. "What are you making?" she'd whisper. And I'd tell her stories while flipping pancakes or seasoning stew. That kitchen became our world, a safe place built on flavor, laughter, and survival. But money changes people. Or maybe it just reveals who they really are. After culinary school, I opened Maison Rue, a modest, upscale bistro on the corner of 7th and Carlton. It was small, but every inch carried my soul. I built it from scratch, literally. Nights spent sleeping in the walk-in freezer during the winter when I couldn't afford rent. Scraping together payroll while forgoing my own paycheck. And Ava? She was always there in the early days. Sitting at table 5, cheering me on with mock Yelp reviews scrawled on napkins. Back then, I thought she understood. But when Dad died, he left everything to her. I got a car with a busted transmission and a box of old photo albums. She inherited the empire. The houses, the money, the real estate, the shares. And worst of all, the name. That was the first betrayal. She claimed it wasn't her fault. "It's what Dad wanted," she'd said, barely able to meet my eyes. He thought I had a better head for business. Translation: I was the artist. She was the brand. After that, we drifted. She stopped visiting the restaurant, stopped returning my calls, started turning up in gossip columns, dating billionaires, and wearing clothes worth more than my monthly rent. She opened her own restaurant chain, Eclat, backed by Dad's fortune, using my recipes with a few tweaks and her name stamped across every menu. The second betrayal. Still, I swallowed the bitterness. Life had taught me early on that pride doesn't pay the bills. So I hustled. I worked. I built. Until 2 years ago when a fire broke out in the back kitchen and burned Maison Rue to the ground. Insurance denied my claim. Technicalities, they said. I was left with nothing. That's when things got dark. I couch surfed, picked up catering gigs, did meal prep for gym brothers who couldn't tell the difference between saffron and turmeric. Every day, I passed the boarded-up remains of my dream, waiting for a miracle. But miracles don't come wrapped in hope. They come wrapped in hard choices. Then came Ava's birthday. Her assistant, some bright-eyed 20-something with a Bluetooth headset and a smile full of Botox, reached out to me 3 weeks ago. Said Ava wanted to throw her party at Maison Rue. Said it would be nostalgic. A tribute. I nearly laughed in her face. The place is rubble. Oh no, she said sweetly. Ava bought it last year. Rebuilt it. It's under her hospitality group now. That was betrayal number 3. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. My sister had taken what little I had left and turned it into a playground for the elite. My restaurant, rebuilt without me. No credit. No invitation. Just a footnote in her fairy tale. But I went. I had to see it. Maybe I thought I could find closure. Maybe I wanted to feel something other than anger. And there it was. Gleaming. Polished floors. A gold-plated sign. My original recipes rebranded with French names. My story scrubbed clean. I snuck in wearing borrowed clothes, hoping to catch a glimpse before anyone noticed. I didn't plan to talk to her. I didn't plan anything. But Ava saw me. And with all eyes on her, she said it. Homeless. Get out. The girl who used to eat burnt toast and call it gourmet looked at me like I was dirt on her shoe. That night, something inside me snapped. Not with rage, but with clarity. This wasn't just about family. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about legacy. And I wasn't done yet. I didn't leave right away. After she said it, after she humiliated me in front of everyone, I just stood there. My fists clenched. My breath sharp. My pride bleeding out all over the polished marble floor. No one stopped me. Not the security guards. Not the waitstaff. Not even Ava. She had already turned back to her designer cake and the cameras. Her world didn't include me anymore. But mine still included her. I walked out into the cold night, jacket flapping in the wind like a worn flag. My body felt numb, but my mind was on fire. For the first time in months, maybe years, I saw it clearly. I had nothing left to lose. And people with nothing to lose are dangerous. I crashed on my friend Malik's couch that night. He was one of the few who hadn't abandoned me when everything burned down, literally and figuratively. A line cook turned food truck owner, Malik knew struggle the way most people know routine. You want revenge or redemption? He asked, handing me a cold beer. I didn't answer right away. Both, I said finally. He nodded like he understood. Because he did. The next morning, I started making calls. Not to investors. Not to lawyers. I wasn't going to fight Ava in a courtroom. She had too much money, too many connections. No, I was going to take back what she stole the only way I knew how, with food. I called old friends from culinary school, former staff from Maison Rue, even a few burned-out line cooks I'd met over the years. I pitched them a vision, not of fine dining or spotless linen, but of something raw, authentic, real. A pop-up. Underground. Invite only. a culinary rebellion. We called it bitter salt. It started in Malik's truck. 3 burners, 2 coolers, and a dream. I crafted a new menu, not French fusion, not molecular gastronomy, just soul food elevated with precision and heart. The kind of food that told a story with every bite. My story. Word spread faster than I expected. People showed up. Not for the hype, but for the heat. For the flavor. For the feeling that this wasn't just a meal, it was a movement. Instagram influencers called it guerrilla gourmet. Food bloggers raved about the mystery chef with a vendetta. No one knew it was me, not yet. But Ava did. I knew it the moment I saw her assistant at the second pop-up, trying to blend in with a camera tucked under her scarf. I didn't kick her out. I let her eat. Let her taste what authenticity actually was. 2 days later, I got a cease and desist letter. Impersonation of a Kloss brand identity, it read. Use of proprietary recipes. Bullshit. Those recipes were mine before they were hers. Malik laughed when he saw the letter. You made it, man. You're officially a threat. But it wasn't funny. Ava wasn't just trying to shut me down. She was trying to erase me all over again. So I hit back. I released a statement online under a pseudonym, The Ghost in the Kitchen. It told the story of a chef who lost everything, only to rise again in the alleys and parking lots of a city that forgot him. It didn't name names, but it didn't need to. The post went viral in hours. Suddenly, people wanted to know who I was. Articles speculated. Reddit threads buzzed. Could this be the real mind behind a claw? They asked. Was this the original Maison Rouge chef? Ava's PR team scrambled. Released carefully worded statements. Called me a disgruntled ex-employee. Claimed I was taking advantage of family tragedy for attention. That stung. But I wasn't backing down. Then came the offer. She invited me to lunch. Private. Neutral ground. A rooftop cafe downtown. She wore all white, clean, pristine, untouched. I wore my best button-up, the sleeves still stained from the last service. Why are you doing this? She asked, sipping espresso like we were strangers discussing the weather. You already asked me to leave once, I said. Why ask me to come back? She sighed. Because I didn't think you'd fight. And now you're hurting the brand. The brand? I laughed bitterly. That brand was my life. A long pause. Then she reached into her designer purse and pulled out a check. $250,000. If you walk away now, this is yours, she said softly. You can open something new. Start fresh. Quietly. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. But my silence wasn't for sale. I tore the check in half and dropped it in her untouched salad. This isn't about money, Ava, I said. This is about truth. About taking back my name. She didn't flinch. Just stared at me like she didn't recognize the person across from her. Maybe she didn't. Bitter salt exploded after that. We moved out of Malik's truck into an abandoned warehouse downtown. Painted it ourselves. Strung lights from the ceiling. Built a kitchen from donated appliances and borrowed parts. Every wall told a story. Every plate pushed boundaries. People lined up outside before we even opened the doors. Musicians played. Poets read. Chefs collaborated. It wasn't a restaurant, it was a revolution. And then, one night, the times came. A reviewer with a sharp tongue and a sharper pen. She ate in silence. Took notes. Said nothing. 2 days later, her article hit. The heartbeat of the city, bitter salt, is what fine dining forgot. 5 stars. Ava's empire shook. Investors pulled out. Eclos numbers dropped. Her image, once untouchable, began to crack. But even as her world tilted, she didn't stop. She launched a counter-campaign, claimed ownership of my narrative, released a line of inspired dishes, plagiarized my bitter salt menu with new names and polished plating. That was the last straw. I filed a lawsuit, not just for defamation or stolen recipes, but for creative ownership. I had documented everything: emails, notebooks, drafts, photos, years of proof. Ava fired back with high-powered attorneys. She thought she could crush me, but public opinion had turned. And the truth? The truth had a flavor you couldn't fake. The night before the court hearing, I found her waiting outside the warehouse. No cameras, no press, just Ava. She looked tired, fragile, almost. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said quietly. I didn't answer right away, just stared at the sister I used to know. "You didn't just hurt me," I said. "You forgot me." She nodded. Maybe I did. But I remember now. For a moment, we stood in silence. Years of love and loss stretched between us like a tightrope. "I'm not backing down," I said finally. "I know," she replied. "And maybe you shouldn't." She walked away without another word. The next day, I stood in court, heart pounding, hands steady. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every artist who got buried, every chef who cooked in silence, every dreamer who got robbed of their voice. It was time to make them hear me. Loud, clear, unapologetically. Because I wasn't the homeless man at the back of the room anymore. I was the one holding the fire. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, but emotionally. Sterile walls, blank stares, the kind of silence that dared you to flinch. I sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing the only suit I owned. Across from me sat Ava, flawless as always. Designer everything. Her team of high-priced attorneys flanking her like bodyguards. She didn't look at me. The judge called the session to order. What followed was a war, not with fists or fury, but with words and evidence. My lawyer began with the story. Not the legal version, but my version. He told them about Maison Rue, about how I built it with my own hands, about the recipes, the nights I slept in the kitchen, the soul I poured into each dish. Then came the exhibits. Pages from my original cookbooks, emails between Ava and me during her early restaurant planning, messages where I'd shared ideas, menus, plating styles. She'd asked for help just to get started. Turns out, just to get started became an empire. Her lawyer countered with numbers, contracts, claimed I never signed anything, that I'd gifted her my input, that none of the recipes were registered under my name. But this wasn't just about ink on paper. This was about truth. And truth, when spoken loud enough, becomes undeniable. Then it was my turn to speak. I stepped to the stand and faced a room full of strangers. And my sister. "I was never homeless," I began. "I was heartless. I gave away pieces of myself until there was nothing left, and when I asked for even a fraction back, I was told to leave. I let that hang. My sister didn't just steal my food. She stole my fire, my voice, my identity. And when I finally stood up, she tried to pay me off, to stay quiet. I almost took it. God knows I needed it. But I realized something. I looked directly at Ava. Her expression was unreadable. If I stayed silent, I'd be homeless forever. Not without a roof, but without a name. And that I couldn't live with. The courtroom was silent. When I stepped down, I felt weightless. Not because I knew I'd won, but because, for the first time in years, I had spoken my truth without shame, without filter. The judge requested a recess before the ruling. Ava approached me during the break. Alone. You embarrass me, she said softly. You erased me, I replied. She stared at me for a long moment. Her eyes, for once, didn't shine with ego or entitlement. Just something raw. Regret, maybe. I didn't think you had it in you, she murmured. That's the thing about fire, I said. It never really dies. When the judge returned, she ruled in my favor. Not everything, but enough. Intellectual property rights for the original recipes, mine. Damages, awarded. A formal public acknowledgement from Ava's brand, ordered. But more than that, my name was restored. The articles that followed called it the reckoning of bitter salt. But I called it something else. The beginning. The headlines came fast, from ruin to revolution. Brother outsmarts hospitality heiress. Chef behind eclat revealed. I didn't care about the spotlight. I cared about the silence breaking. For the first time in years, I felt heard. Seen. Not as someone's brother, not as the shadow behind a brand, but as myself. And bitter salt? It exploded. Reservations booked out months in advance. Investors came knocking, but I was cautious this time. No more blind trust. No more backroom deals. Everything was on my terms. I hired the same people who stood with me when I had nothing. Malik became co-owner. My old sous chef, Lena, came back to lead the kitchen on nights I needed rest. We opened a second pop-up on the west side, then a third. And through it all, I never changed the menu. Because every dish still told my story. As for Ava, she disappeared for a while. Took a sabbatical, according to her PR team. Eclat limped along, but the trust was broken. Then, one rainy afternoon, she showed up at Bitter Salt. No cameras. No entourage. Just her and a soaked trench coat. She didn't ask for a table. Just waited by the exit until my shift ended. You're really not going to gloat, she asked when I walked over. I shrugged. I already said what I needed to say. She hesitated. Then reached into her purse, not for a check this time, but a small black notebook. Worn edges. Pages folded, food stained. My recipe journal. The original. I took it, she said quietly. Back when Dad died. I didn't know why. I wanted to hold on to a piece of you. I took the journal from her, flipping through pages written in my old handwriting. Chicken scratch notes beside dishes I'd long forgotten. I'm sorry, Elijah, she whispered. Not just for the birthday, for all of it. I looked at her. Really looked. Not as a villain, but as the girl I used to protect. The one who once called my burnt toast a masterpiece. I know, I said. And that was enough. Months passed. The chaos settled. Life moved on. I still work every night. Still lose myself in the heat of the kitchen, the rhythm of the plates, the music of laughter rising from tables filled with people who believe in something real. Bitter Salt never became an empire, because that's not what I wanted. It became a haven. A home. For me. For my crew. For the ones who'd been overlooked, underestimated, and shut out. One night, as I locked up, Malik leaned against the doorway beside me. You know, he said, you could have taken the check and disappeared. Yeah, I replied, smiling. But then I'd still be outside, watching someone else live my story. He nodded. You're not homeless anymore, man. No, I said, turning the key in the lock. I'm home. The smell of smoked paprika lingered in the air as the last light of evening spilled through the high windows of Bitter Salt. I stood alone at the pass, wiping down the counter where hundreds of stories had been plated, served, and devoured. There was something sacred about this space, not because of the fame, the 5-star reviews, or the whispers of a documentary deal in the works. But because it was mine, not borrowed, not stolen, not inherited, built, earned. Every scar on my hands told a chapter. Every broken plate had a lesson. And every dish that left my kitchen carried more than flavor, it carried truth. People still ask about Ava. Some want drama. Others want redemption. The truth is, we're still figuring it out. She comes by sometimes. She eats quietly, pays the bill, leaves a generous tip. We don't say much, but maybe we don't have to. Some wounds don't need words, just time. I'm not angry anymore. That night, the night she pointed at me and called me homeless, used to haunt me. Now, it fuels me, because she was right in a way. I was lost, displaced, forgotten, but I'm not anymore. Now, I wake up every day knowing who I am. Not just a chef, not just a brother. A man who found home where it mattered most, inside himself. And if you ask me what success tastes like, it tastes like fire, and salt, and the sweetness of never giving up. The end.